Hi, and welcome to Kicksboxes at kicksboxes.blogspot.com. My name is Rick Fryer. In today's Technique Critique, we're going to explore our most ambitious project yet, Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch. Now, before we get started into this, let me begin by saying I am by far no expert in the art of Jeet Kune Do. I'm just going to present this technique as I've learned to understand and practice it. Okay, let's start by going over the 4 ways that power is usually generated during this technique. The 1-inch punch, as the name implies, is a very, very short-range punch. It's right there in the clinch range. When you're right on top of your opponent, they've grabbed you or something, and you can't really get your full straight punch in. Okay? You can't really blast them. They're not out here. They're right here on top of you. So you want to build up a lot of power in a very, very short area. So the way you do that is by getting power from every little motion of your body. The first power center that we have is our legs. The power in the 1-inch punch comes from just a slight shift moving forward towards that front leg. Punch is usually over the front arm. So you just shift forward, and that gives you a little bit of momentum. Second power center, and your major power center, is a turning and rotation of the body. So your hips come forward, your torso just kind of turns to the sides. You lean forward, turn. Third power center is going to be your shoulder. Shoulder just sort of rotates around. It comes back and forth, just like a regular punch, but it's going to be really, really tight. And our last power center comes from the wrist. The wrist just makes a small motion coming up like this, okay? Just cranks up. So as you're there, you just come forward and strike up. Strike up. Strike up. One way that Bruce Lee, and a practice method that I really, really like, that Bruce Lee mentions in his book on 1-inch punch, is to take a coffee can. And by the way, that's why we're here at this counter. A bar or counter is perfect for practicing this. You take a coffee can, fill it with some sand or some gravel, and I like to actually place the coffee can upside down so the plastic's on the bottom. It gives you a little more friction to the technique. And you're just going to practice it here. Remembering, shifting forward, rotating the body, rotating the shoulder, and bringing that wrist a little bit up. So from here, we just pop right into it and send the can across. One more time. Really good way to practice. Just coming in here, staying right on top of that can, and just popping right forward. Sending it out. Okay, now this technique is really famous because Bruce Lee used to use it very often in his demonstrations. He would take someone, he would strike them and send them off into a chair, or I've even heard he would send people off into swimming pools, things like that. And he just showed the amount of power that could be generated in a very short distance. However, in my style of Kyoshu Jitsu Tenkyukai, we use the same technique. However, rather than shooting up with our wrist, we actually bring it down. So rather than popping with these bottom 2 knuckles the way Bruce Lee would, we come down with the top 2 knuckles. So everything is still the same. You're still shifting forward, you're still using your torso, you're still using your shoulders, and you're still using your wrist, only this time you're popping down. So it looks a little more like this. Okay? The biggest difference between these 2 punches is the way that your elbow rotates out. When I throw the 1-inch punch the way Bruce Lee teaches it, your elbow, as your hands come up, your elbow tends to kind of pop out to the side, like this. When you come down with your top knuckles, your elbow tends to kind of pop into the center, like this, okay? It's not much, just a little this way or a little this way. Actually, I think Bruce Lee's method is a little safer. This is a slightly stronger position for your elbow than here. But again, it's so short, it's so quick, it shouldn't make a whole lot of difference. But what I do think it does is that when you hit someone with the knuckles coming up, just like the coffee can, it tends to shoot them away, which is great if you want to knock someone into a swimming pool or a chair. However, a lot of times in a fighting situation, you want to send some energy into the person. However, you don't want them to go flying away from you. This is where that downward motion, it tends to send up the energy down, so the person tends to stay there. So they take the impact, but they're still there, so that you can continue with more techniques. Try it out yourself, try both ways, and see which one you like. Okay, now one of my favorite methods for training this technique comes from a YouTube video I saw a couple months ago. It was a young kid practicing his 1-inch punch and decided to post it. So what he did is he took his heavy bag, placed it on the ground like this, sat cross-legged in front of the bag, and just began practicing his 1-inch punch. Just shooting right into it. oh, you should have seen the comments. You don't know what you're doing. The power comes from your hips. Blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. The kid knew exactly what he was doing. What happens when you take yourself and sit down, you take your hips, you take your legs out of the equation, which forces you to work on your body torso, your upper body, your shoulders, and your wrist. Whether you're coming up or coming down, you have to force your body to generate power right here. It's a fantastic way to train. Of course, this isn't the way that you'll actually use the technique, but it's a great way to train your upper body to perform it. Okay, another really good apparatus for practicing this technique, just really working the forearms or coming up or coming down with it, is an apparatus I call the fishing pole. It's just a stick with a plate tied to the end of it. You want it fairly lightweight, but something you can work with. Just for coming up, you're just going to hold it here and just make the forearm lift it up. Just coming up and down. If you want to try the other version where you're coming down with the punch, we're going to do the same thing. Bring it up over our head, just like a fishing pole, and just raise up. Now if you're like me, you'll probably realize that you get a lot more power, you can lift a lot more weight going this way, so just hold it down further on the stick, and that'll make it more difficult. Now one problem that a lot of people have when they practice with punching bags or with coffee cans is that they end up with the tendency to push their target, okay? Or even when you're practicing for demonstrations where you want to put someone into a chair, they end up always pushing their one-in punch. You don't want to do that. You want to strike with it. So what you need to do is get a hold of a focus pad, something hard. Either have a partner hold it for you, or since it's a close technique, you can actually hold it for yourself. Just want to grab yourself a pad, bring your hand up, and practice popping that fist right in. Pop it in. Just like a regular punch, you always retract your punch. You want to do the same thing here with the 1 inch. Pop it in and bring it back out. Even though it's a 1 inch punch, you still retract. Make sure you get that pop. Okay, now so far all of our 1 inch punches have been linear. We're always coming in at our opponent, whether we're coming up or we're coming down with the punch. Right? Head, face. We're always coming straight at them. But just like we've got jabs and crosses that come straight, we've also got hook punches that come across. We can also hook with a 1 inch punch, coming right across. It gives a good strong hit. This technique comes from master instructor Song Pak. He calls it the sword fist. It's really just a figure-8 motion with your hand. So from here, you just figure-8 and strike across. This motion is going to be very familiar to anyone who uses stick fighting. The figure-8 pattern with the stick, this is the same motion that you're going to be doing with your fist. You bring the fist up and just bring it around, striking right up. And in a very short area, you can develop a lot of power. Now you need to strike precisely with this. You're going for temples, you're coming for the jaw. I'm not going to go too much into the pressure points here, but you need to hit them good, you need to hit them quick, you need to be ready to move with it. But if you're in here in a grappling situation, you can still pop a good one. What I also like about these is a lot of times when you're punching from back here and you hit, you can actually damage your hand. It's very easy because you've developed a lot of power. Because these are shorter range, your chances of hurting yourself are much less. So even though you're punching in an awkward position like this, because you haven't developed as much power through the momentum, you'll have less probability of injuring your hand. So if we're in here nice and close, you just pop it up and give them a good hard strike right to the head. Bam! And then you can follow up with whatever else you need to. Okay, I hope I've given you some good ideas for the training and practice of your own martial art. Join us again soon for the technique critique, and best of luck with your own training. Remember, train hard, fight dirty. See you soon.